Hi everyone, welcome to week 3 of EDU250 Introduction to Special Education. This week we're going to start talking about specific learning disabilities and specific disability categories in general. So this week, as I said, we're going to be looking at specific learning disabilities, SLD, and also visual impairments, hearing impairments, and deafblindness. So this week, I really want you to be thinking about inclusion and least restrictive environment in the context of the disabilities that you're going to be learning about. So this week for your learning materials, you have a bunch of stuff to read about inclusion and inclusive environments, also about deaf culture, and a fact sheet about language impairments. You also have some videos to watch, including one by Dan Habib, who is a filmmaker, and others about visual impairments, and learning disabilities, as well as deaf and hard of hearing students in the classroom. There are some optional assignments if you do have or learning materials. If you do have the textbook, chapters 2, 7, 11, 12, and 13 are applicable. And I also have a link to what is a speech impairment for some additional information if you are interested. So for our discussion this week, I'm going to have you try on 2 disabilities. So in the discussion prompt, you will see that there are 2 simulators, one for what it's like to have dyslexia, so you're going to get to try on what dyslexia feels like, and another one for auditory processing disorders. So you're going to try on both of those disabilities, and then in your discussion post, you're really going to talk about what it felt like to you to try on those disabilities. And how do you think that having those kind of disabilities or any other specific learning disability could impact a child's social and emotional development? I'd also like you to think about the impact, and this ties to the social emotional development, of what having an invisible disability is like. It's not like somebody who's in a wheelchair or somebody who you see that they have a disability. This is somebody who looks just as typical as anybody else who could have a pretty significant disability in these areas. And then talk a little bit about accommodations and modifications for a student with a specific learning disability. And that will really tie to what we did last week. And make sure that you incorporate information from this week's learning materials and any other research that you've done. And remember, your initial post to the prompt should be up by Wednesday night at midnight, and you should include references and in-pick citations, at least in your initial post to the prompt. So if you have any questions, please let me know. So for our assignment this week, you're going to be doing another family presentation or poster. So what I want you to keep in mind as you're doing this, your audience is a family or a general education teacher. So it's not special education educators that know the jargon and may have some background. You're going to be talking to people who do not have a background in this information. So what I want you to do is either prepare a 5 to 8 minute presentation for families and gen ed teachers about why inclusion and inclusive classroom environments are important. And one of the most important things I want you to do is to really think about what it means to be meaningfully included. So I'll give you a little hint. If a child is in a classroom and is sitting at the back table with a paraprofessional, that is not meaningful inclusion. What does it really feel like to be meaningful included? What does that mean? And I sort of gave you the difference between being included and being meaningfully included. So it's not just about where you're located, it's how you're included and how you're part of that life, or how the child is part of the life of that classroom. And I want you to think a lot about adult supports, because I do know that it's just human nature that when we start thinking about what kind of supports a child could use in a general ed classroom, we do tend to jump to additional adult support pretty quickly. Additional adult support, and so I'm sort of giving you the answer to the question. Additional adult support really can be very restrictive for a child. A child that has a one-to-one adult with them all the time will frequently, and I've experienced this, frequently have the other children and students in the classroom talking to the adult, not the child. There are implications for over supporting a child. So think about where in that continuum of services adult supports typically belong, and how you could really think about not jumping to that as like the first course of an accommodation for a student is having that adult support. Make sure that you use the information from this week's learning materials and any other research that you've done. Be sure to use references, and for every reference you have, you need to have at least one in-text citation so I know where you got the information from. And again, you can do a presentation, must have a narration, or a poster, whichever one you feel more comfortable in doing. And you guys are very creative, so I'm really looking forward to seeing these. Have a great week, and hope to see some of you at the meetup on Sunday night. Bye-bye.